my first 15 years trying to get out of the woods because I thought it was horrible. And I spent the next 20 years trying to get back. The truth of the matter is we need to be well-rounded individuals like our forefathers were.
Boom, bada bing. We got, let's see, Burke Spring in the house, Diana, of course, Patrick Seven. Patrick Seven, he gets around now. Matt King, my man Matt King up there. Yes, don't forget. How do I sound out there, everybody? Do I sound all right? What's going on, everyone? That's Mr. Skullhead, part of our show there. Tell me if I sound okay out there. I've been struggling with this microphone. I don't know what the deal is. 5x5, so we're good. Thank you, Burke Spring. We're excited, guys. Tonight, we've got a special guest who I had the pleasure of meeting last fall and got this awesome book from him that if you don't have them, you need to get you one of these because it is awesome. There you go. And the link is also in the bio. Oh, man, look.
Yeah, buddy.
G,
I'm the only one without one here.
Go-to gear guy. Where's your book at, Brian? One?
You wrote them. He's all out of copies. You sent them out to all of us.
Yeah.
So, man, we got Guy, Sandra, we got Kelly, Teresa. What's going on, Teresa? I know you've been back there in the background with your man. And, of course, you know, Russ behind the curtain, the man behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz, the Russ of Oz doing his thing back there behind the curtain. Always appreciate Russ. That's what we're going to call you from now on, Russ. It's the Russ of Oz. So, guys, tonight we have this guy here, Brian Duff, Mind for Survival, this awesome book I've started reading, How to Face Any Crisis, Minimize Unwanted Struggle, and Live Your Best Possible Life. I mean, just the cover says a lot. Brian, how you been doing, brother?
I'm doing well, man. How about yourself, dude?
We're doing good. We're doing good. It's been a rough day. Actually, it's been a rough week. But once again, it's all about that positive attitude, right? That mental positive place that you got to be to keep pushing forward. Just got through putting $3,000 worth of injectors in my truck out there in the driveway.
I saw you did that. I saw
cold.
you threw up a little canopy and everything to get out of the weather.
A little
right?
tent. Persevere. Where there's a will, there's a way, right?
Yeah.
So, and then, of course, down below, the Triple G, the go-to gear guy.
What's up,
Brian
guys?
Loftus is back in the house with us. So we've got two Brians. So, and remember, guys, if you have a question, I tell you what, put mine for in front of your question. But you should be asking questions, this guy. Let's jump into this, Brian. You've got this book. Before we start talking about this book, give everybody a little bit of the background, because even your upbringing, man, you have lived multiple lives. I thought I was the only one that did that.
Well, you did too, man. I remember we came on my show. It was like, wow, this guy's been all over with stories with your dad and moving everywhere.
This guy is demented. Just say it. Be like, this guy is messed up. I actually had a guy tell me that. A very well-known, Brian Loftus was there, a very well-known guy in the industry of survival and tracking all that stuff. We were sitting around talking, telling stories. It was just the instructors. And he looked at me, Brian, he said, he was like, man, T, I really like you, but you are screwed up. Like, you were seriously messed up. I'm like, you remember that, Brian, when he told me that?
Was that in Atlanta? We went down for Blade Show?
No, that was probably
beside the fire.
That was beside the fire. Yeah, that
I'll
was
tell you
beside the
what,
fire with
yeah.
the well-known guy that's been on
Oh,
TV and done all the things, and
okay, yeah,
he was
yeah,
like, "Man, I like it, T, but wow, you were really messed up." I'm like, "Well,
yeah. You went out there. As I'm saying, I
Hey,
mean,
that's
I wish that a TV, a reality TV show could have gotten a hold of you like 20 years ago and just followed you around with a camera because, dude, you'd be sitting on a beach in Maui somewhere. I'm telling you right now, you would
I
be.
have to write it as fiction.
Hide some of the names.
Write it as fiction. Be like, "There ain't no way that actually happened."
that's character, man. It's you've lived a character building life.
There we go. My book, Talents of a Misspent Youth, right here, now available on Kindle. Get you one. Thank you, Russ of Oz. You can put that away now. People actually start thinking I did a book. Um, but man, jump into it. Jump into it, Brian.
Yeah,
Give us
I mean,
the. I mean,
I've
yeah.
been all over the map. I guess a lot of my life. I grew up in Southern California and in Los Angeles, and was I mean, it was just the 80s. Parents, I was a little bit wild and did some stuff and got in trouble here and there. Nothing too bad. I never got caught stuck in jail, but yeah, I was hit by a car when I was a kid. I got stabbed at 18 for letting my mouth get me into problems that I shouldn't have. Uh, went and became went to college, and I was supposed to go to college to go to law school, and ended up I took a fire science class because I was on a swim team, and my coach told me, "Hey, you can pick one class that you want to take that's fun. What do you want to do?" And so I said, "Oh, I'll take that fire science class. Those guys look pretty cool riding around on engines." Next thing I know, I was an EMT and paramedic, and then became a firefighter. I did that for a few years, and I don't know. I didn't groove on the fire department so much. I mean, it's great job. I loved it. Great guys, just wasn't my calling. So one day I'm on the way home. I was supposed to go surfing that morning, and on the way home, the surf wasn't any good. So I stopped at a red light and looked to my right, and there was an Army recruiting station. And said, "Oh, let me go see what these guys have to offer." So I rolled in there, and they said, "What do you want to do?" And there was a picture of a guy driving a tank and a picture of a guy jumping out of an airplane. I said, "Oh, I want to do one of those." And they said, "Well, we're kind of full on tank drivers right now, but we can probably squeeze you in the infantry." And, not knowing nothing, it's like, all right, that sounds like fun. And heck, on my days off, what's that?
Squeeze you into the infantry, right?
Yeah, right. Well, I liked it because on my days off, I would go out to the woods, or I would go out shooting and doing stuff. And I'm like, wow, you're gonna pay me, not a lot, but you're gonna pay me to jump out of planes. You're gonna give me fully automatic machine guns, and I get to do this stuff for fun. So I ended up doing that. I became a Ranger. I was with 3rd Ranger Battalion. When I got out of the military, I went back to being a paramedic for a while. And then once the GWOT kicked off, one of my partners on the ambulance was like, "Hey, they hire medics to go work overseas." And so one thing led to another. A couple months later, I found myself in Afghanistan running some medical clinics, and then ended up ran into a buddy from the Rangers when I was going through the airport in Germany on the way home to leave, and on leave, and he said, he said, "Hey, I asked him, what are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I'm getting ready to go work for this company called Blackwater. They're hiring people to work in Iraq and stuff, and they need former special operations guys who are medics." And so threw my hat in the ringer with them, worked a few years with those guys, and then, man, I bounced around all over. I was in Iraq, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Africa. Spent I think a total on the ground in Iraq. I have 5 years on the ground in Iraq. Came home from that.
In Iraq.
Yeah, just in Iraq.
5 years. Yeah.
So I think just over 2,000 days on the ground in Iraq.
Wow.
Came home from that and managed when I was over there, I ended up taking over I oversaw the contract for the guard force in Baghdad that protected the embassy in Baghdad. And then also for the guard force down in Basra, Iraq, was the world's largest consulate and the world's largest embassy at the time. And then came home and took over. It was a giant security program, diplomatic security program for Department of State. Did that for a while. And then my last kind of corporate gig was I was the training center director for North American Rescue's education and training out in Las Vegas for a while. And then once the PTSD, you go overseas for a bunch of years. You never think, oh yeah, when I come home, I'll have this crazy stuff follow me, and crazy jumped on my back. And so spent a bunch of years dealing with that. And now here I am.
And here we are.
Yeah.
And here we are. Now you work for North American Rescue then. That's awesome. I mean, was it just because the paramedic background along with how did that
Yeah,
transpire?
it was the paramedic, the overseas deployment time. I had when I was working. I don't know if you've heard of Triple Canopy. I ran their diplomatic security program for. Hey, there's Mike from FIB Preparedness. I ran their diplomatic security program that supplied security guys, diplomatic security guys overseas, and so I had a huge training section under me, and so all that combined with I had gone to, at the time it was JTM, and so I had taken some classes out there, and so they had a position open to run the place, and so I was looking for a change, or I was ready for a change, and so it worked out well.
So you have recently had another change. You moved to the cold weather areas, and you've relocated. Are you trying to do the homestead thing now? Is that what it is? Are you trying to do kind of what's your goals? What's your 5-year goal?
Oh man, I don't know. That's dead 5-year goals. Whew,
what's your 2-year goal?
Well, you know what it was, man. I've always
compromised.
I lived down in Georgia for a bunch of years, and I have some places down there. I had some rental properties, and it's just too hot, man. Like and so I lived in Texas, and I moved to Texas for a year. I love Texas. Great place, but it was getting really crowded too, and the rents were going up. And so I found a place up in the mountains that doesn't cost a whole lot. It's away from people, and it's beautiful, man. I walk outside and I look at a trout stream every day sitting outside my door, and so it's
other than that white devil that's laying all over the place. Like every picture, I'm like, man, that looks great, except for that snow laying all over the place, man. That's the only drawback.
You're not.
I kind of enjoy the snow, man. I kind of enjoy it, man. It's not, it's a sign that it won't be hot.
I think that's what it is. Maybe it was because you were in that heat all the time, and now it's just that refreshing cool. I was next to the Michigan line in Fort Wayne, Indiana for like 21 years, and so it was like snow nonstop. And there's Chuck with Homestead Medical. Said, Brian Duff, good to see you. What's going on, Chuck? Awesome dude right there as well. You guys have a lot in common also with the medic stuff and all that kind of things. But yeah, I don't know. I saw too much snow for too long. It was like every time I plowed out, then next day it was just right back. So it looks nice through a picture window next to a fire, never shoveling it, never having to deal with it. It looks great.
Well, I have a 4-wheel drive truck, so I figure if the snow gets too deep to not be able to get out of my driveway, well, I also have a bunch of, I'm a prepper, man. I got a bunch of food. All right, snow me in for a while. It'll warm up eventually and melt the snow. I'll get out of here. So
that's true. That's true. Did you get your truck finally got fixed too from the last adventure you went on, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. It took a little bit, but they had to put a whole new front end on it from when Hurricane Helene decided to smash it. So
a whole front end.
Yeah, just not engine stuff or anything like that, but just all it that tree hit both quarter panels, took out the hood, cracked the windshield, took out some other stuff. So
jeez.
Yeah.
But you had a chainsaw, and that's all that mattered. Once again, prepared for anything.
Yeah.
So what is your goal? I mean, you've got to have something. When you moved, you had to say, okay, here's kind of what I want to do, moving forward. Or was it just to get out of the heat in Texas?
Well, one, it was to get out of the heat in Texas. Two, it was Texas is getting really crowded. I was north of Austin a bit, but that whole Texas Triangle, Austin, Houston, Dallas area is just getting packed. And so I was just kind of over that. And then want to get rural. I want to get more, the ability to be away from people, I guess, because I always think that people are your number one problem if something happens. So it's nice being able to get up and away from that. It's nice. I'm big on going out and digging. This morning I go out and I go out barefoot and stick my feet in the snow and hang out in the mornings and get back to nature. So I really like that. But I get mostly my goal is also to get up here is to work on some Mind for Survival stuff and try to get that going a bit more and, see what I can do with that. And it's it's fun. It gives
So
me the opportunity.
Are we talking about like a Mind for Survival Deuce, the second? Are we talking about a second book, or is this
Oh,
just
I don't know about that one yet,
applying?
man. Dude, that book took a lot out of me, man. I was like, wow, that was real. But no, I'm coming out with some courses, doing some courses, trying to get, make sure that my Facebook group's really active and all that, so people can get in there and get some good, easy information. And, it's like with the book, right? I don't do doom and gloom. That the book isn't about, I have one chapter where it talks about, hey, you might need this many calories, you need this much water, that kind of stuff. But the rest is all mindset. So kind of trying to keep going down that pathway, because there's enough books out there that teach you about, bushcraft, what kind of tools you need, and how, checklists for bug out bags and all that stuff. And it's great. I mean, there are tons of them, but I think my book kind of fills in the in between all of that, right? Like, you can take anything that anybody has when it comes to preparedness, any philosophy, and you could take it, and my book can kind of bind it all together and add to that. So pretty stoked with it.
Well, Mike says, don't die. That's his 5-year goal, and then his weekly goal is cheesecake. I mean, it sounds like a great preparedness plan as far as good job, Mike. And the guy makes great chili as well. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Mike's chili is phenomenal.
But Mike's chili is pretty tasty. So
Mike,
hey, Christy, there's Christy in the house. So let's see here. People neighbors were the number one asset during Helene, which I agree with that.
I agree
Dino,
with that
I would say two-edged sword. Like, if you what's your take? What's your take, Brian? Because my take personally is, people are great if you've established that relationship and built that community prior to. But when the bubble pops, I think that's where the other side of people is what you're going to see. What's your thoughts?
Well, like when I was down with Hurricane Helene, just like he had mentioned in there, the neighbors were all great, right? Because so many trees were down. I want to say your community became about 100 yards east and west, north and south of you, because you couldn't go anywhere else, because there's just no way to, the trees were blocking all the roads. So like, people were walking around and helping one another out and all that. And that's a rural area. And so I think you get a little bit more of that. My concern is if you're in a populated area, like, that might be that way for a little bit, but then I don't think it's very long to the people that don't have something, or the people that are freaking out, starting to be overwhelmed, that they start causing problems,
Okay.
And so that's kind of why I was like, I've had enough of the town. It's where I want that more of that rural setting with people that, I mean, I had a lot of nice people in the area. I lived in Georgetown, which was north of Austin. There's a lot of nice people in there, but there's too many people for, if something happened, I don't think there would be a lot of support. We see it in North Carolina right now.
Oh yeah.
Like people struggling, right? Like, people are struggling.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of support. And so my thing is, if you magnify the number of people and it's that little bit of support, what are you going to have happen?
Right. And then desperate people do desperate things, right? Mm-hmm. Right now, what we're seeing here in North Carolina is that people are desperate, and so of course, you have that element of just bad people. But I think a lot of what's going on is people who are just desperate, and they're theft is huge. The theft thing is going through the roof. People are stealing the stuff left and right. Generators, stuff like that. That was going on all through this whole aftermath of Helene. And so, that's an element. What do you think, Brian, the Triple G? I'm just going to call you G because we got two Brians. I'm going to say, what do you think, G? You live in town, and so you've got people close.
I'm a suburban. I live in suburbia, USA. So it's a little bit different. So I was in Helene. I just happened to be in North Carolina there, going down to it's Salute. Right? Or Saluda?
Saluda.
Yeah, Saluda. That was pronounced. I was going down there for an event, and happened to be stuck in the hurricane. it's a bit more, I want to say a lot more, it's a bit more rural than where I'm at here in Southwest PA. Our homes are a lot closer together. So I have a lot more to contend with. If we should have to have a hurricane and we have a lot of down trees, a lot of down power lines, and people depending on one another, it's not like it is in Appalachia.
Right.
These people out here, they're not self-sufficient at all. I mean, they're all
Let's
looking
throw this
around
way.
like, what do we do? I
If
need a
right
light
now,
bulb, you know.
if right now the lights went out and you got power, no power for at least a month or more, what do you think the result would be for you? I mean, what would you be doing at that point? You
I'm
know,
gonna have
do you
10,000
foresee?
people at my door, T. 10,000 people at my door. And I have actually had my neighbors say that to me. They're like, we're just going to show up at your house. I'm like, no, you're not. I mean, you might try to, but I'm not going to let you in, because everybody knows that I know what I'm doing and I'm prepared. So the biggest thing that I would do, again, personally for me, now I live in a cul-de-sac, right? I have a very small street. I'm one of 9 houses on the street. If something should happen here within 48 hours, I'm out of here. I'm taking all my gear, I'm taking all my supplies, and I'm gone. I'm totally gone. Now, my parents, they live somewhat in the woods. I only have to protect maybe 20% of their property. That's about it. The rest of it is very difficult to get up. We'd be good there for maybe 3 or 4 weeks, but after that, it's going to become very complicated. Very complicated. But again,
Gotcha.
I live in suburbia. I've actually looked at some properties here. I'm right outside of Pittsburgh, PA. So I've looked at some properties about 3 hours away, way up on a mountain where there's almost like nothing. There's like one neighbor within like a 35-mile radius. The big issue I had this particular property, which is why I did not purchase it, is that there's no running streams. There's no water sources. That's it. There's a municipal water source down below, but that's like 300 yards down. I would have to get some sort of pump system. And of course that's illegal unless, you really, the shit hits the fan and you really have to depend on that to pump that up the side of the mountain. And then you have to have a big old pump system, and it's a whole lot of complicated things. So it depends on what what the catastrophe might be.
Yeah.
I
you
think
can carry water. That's another thing. It sucks, but you could do that.
I think one of the things that people need to do is always think about time and distance, right? Time and distance, not just from people, because people could be problems, but exactly that time and distance from a problem. And you create time and distance separation, one, by securing your home, right? Use the 5 Ds of security, right? And the first one is you define your perimeter, right? And you say, okay, everything outside that's outside of my concern. I'm dealing with everything inside. And so that's your perimeter becomes, well, can you keep people out or can you detect people coming in, right? So you can't defend, you can't do anything against a person if you don't know they're there. And then so hardening your house, because if you live in a suburban area, an urban area, and I think years ago, a lot of people were always focused on, I'm going to bug out to the woods. That was kind of the thing, right? Now it's, I think with COVID, more and more people realize, like, I might have to sit where I'm at. So how do you do that? Brian has a place to go, right? And so he, not everybody has that. So it's looking at your situation. Okay, I don't have a place to go. It's also looking at as a pace plan. Your primary place is your home, because that's where all your stuff is. That's where you feel comfortable. That's where you can, and hopefully none of this ever happens, right? Hopefully we all waste money and time doing all this stuff. We have fun with it. I enjoy it, but so doing those 5 Ds, being able to detect someone, being able to deter someone, delay them from getting in, if then trying to, deny them from getting into your home. And then if you have to, defend, but you do that by, strengthening your doors. How can I protect my windows? What can I do to make my place as impossible to get into as possible? Because that gives you that time and distance from the problem actually impacting you and your family. And that's like the P of your pace plan. Your alternate might be, well, I have some family or friends I can go to that are, hopefully a decent bit away, so that maybe they're not as impacted by whatever the disaster is, or they're out a little bit farther where you don't have to worry about it, then, you know, and working your way down through a PACE plan for what do you have going on.
Now, Brian, let me ask you this. You're a book guy. Obviously, you're a book guy. And a lot of things you're talking about, I've read in some books. Are you familiar with the name Joel Skousen?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so Joel Skousen has written a couple of books. His main book is called Strategic Relocation.
Mm-hmm.
So what he does is he takes all 50
book.
states. Yeah, phenomenal book. I mean, the guy sold a ton of them.
Mm-hmm.
So he takes every state and he bases every state on like I think a 4-star system.
Mm-hmm.
And he has to deal with, crime, military targets, nuclear targets, mean income, the population density. I mean, the whole 9 yards. The guy's extremely intelligent. And that book's been out for, 15 years, 20 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, my favorite book by him, I own all of his books. I used to sell all of his books. I lost my contract with the guy. I just didn't sell enough of them. The book I really love by him is called The Strategic Home. So the book's about this thick. I mean, it's great. It's exactly everything that you're talking about. You're talking about can you protect your perimeter? And what do you have as far as your stores? If somebody should rush up on your home, listen, if you have a lot of glass on your home, you're not protecting that, right?
Right.
Like you have to have some sort of fortification. So this guy has thought about pretty much everything. He actually runs it's a weekly forum called The World Affairs Brief. It's either weekly or it's monthly. The World Affairs Brief. But the guy he's absolutely brilliant. Brilliant. He's a Northwest Coast guy. I want to say, Washington State somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But the guy, he really has his ear to the ground on what's going on right now and what has been going on for probably the last 20 to 30 years in our country.
Yeah, that's great.
So, speaking of things going on, of course, the economy. I voted for Trump, but the prices keep going up. It seems like getting beat up on the pocketbook. So I've got FIB here had a question, and Mike said, "What's your take on the economic bubble pop potential? What say ye, Mr. Duff?"
Man, I think I look at our money system as being fantasy land. It's it's not real. They've proven over years that they manipulate the money and that what they can do with things. So I think the potential is always there to pop. But then I also think that, if we all went out and got, index card monopoly money and we all agreed on its value, that it's worth something. That's what we have right now. We just all say it's worth something. It's all based on the stock market and all that. It's not based on gold, any of that stuff. So we just all kind of agree that, oh yeah, this dollar is worth $1, and we spend and go from there. So I don't know what the chances of the economy popping. I think it's always possible though, because again, we're on this fiat currency that it's as good as everybody believes it is. Right. And so, who knows how that goes. It's going to be interesting to see. I know, Trump's talking about getting into the going in and checking out Fort Knox and all that.
Yes.
Who knows? Who knows what comes of that? There's so many different things that can happen. I mean, you guys have probably talked about on your show. I know when I was on a show with Chris Weatherman a while back, we talked about it. There's still, as much as people aren't looking at it now, there were possibly tens of thousands of bad guys that got into our country. Right. And so if you have a bunch of terrorist attacks happen, that could affect the economy. There's so many different ways that can go, that it's just, it's the prepper thing, right? 360-degree preparedness. Yes. Prepare so that way you can weather a resistant economy. How can you do that? Have your food stockpile ready to go. I just did an article on that. So that way, if prices go crazy and you have, a year's worth of food or 6 months worth of food, you can supplement what you're getting, right? Find out ways to make yourself more resilient to that economy going bad.
Great answer. I mean, that's and yes, like that's what we're shooting for as well. You know, beefing up the garden, expanding the garden, adding more livestock. You know, we're doing all those things. We have Burke Spring here, the Forward Operating Base (FOB). Our group work hard to learn skills and practice skills and refine skills. Then we find challenges to discover as many different ways as possible to do those skills. Recommendations. I'm going to assume this was a two-part. Let's see here. We're looking for 100 different ways to do those same skills, redundancy. Any recommendations to improve process?
I think you're already on it, man. You're trying to find holes in your plan. So I like the idea of go flip your circuit breaker on your house. Have everybody in your group flip their circuit breakers and shut your houses off. And say, we're going to shut our houses off for a weekend and see what you need. I got up here. I don't know. I moved about 2-3 weeks ago, and man, we had one blizzard come through, and next thing I know, I'm sitting without power. And it's like, oh, guess what? The propane, cause I'm on propane don't work. The heater doesn't work when there's no power to it. Right. So it's like, all right, what do I need to do for this? All right. Get my big buddy heater, start planning on ways. The best way you can do is train. We say in the military, train like you fight, right? Mm-hmm. Prep like it's a disaster, and then see where those holes are, and then have those redundancies in the skills, whether it's if you have a good group of people. I always say that the number one thing that we should focus on before skills is making sure you're all values aligned, making sure everybody gets together. Because man, when you pressure test a group of people, if they don't get along, that thing's going to crack. So once you have that, then look at your skills and start saying, okay, do you have a paramedic? Do you have a nurse? Do you have a doctor? Say when it comes to medical stuff, finding out what they paramedics can teach people. Hey, you can run a stop. You don't have to get certified. Run a stop the bleed course. Have someone teach CPR. What's the biggest thing that life-threatening problem that someone might run into with a family member, right? Possibly a heart attack. They stop breathing, they choke. So that's applicable when it's not a disaster, right? Stop the bleed, figure out what can you do to support that doctor. You got a guy that's a mechanic. All right, well, have him teach people how to work on cars. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to you're changing a bunch of injectors. There's a lot of people out there never changed a tire. And I'll tell you, it's one of the things that we drilled on when I was in Iraq working with Blackwater, because if your tire went out, depending on where you're at, man, they could form a crowd in a hurry, and all of a sudden you have guns and all kinds of nasty stuff coming out. And so if you're sitting there, fumbling around trying to get a tire changed, you're going to be in a problem. And so we used to do it where from the time the tire went out, we had a new tire back on the car on the Suburban in about 3 minutes. And so finding out where do you get hung up on that? It was like one of the things that the ground would get so hot, we'd put the jack down. Well, the jack would sink into the asphalt. So then when you let the truck down, the truck's stuck on the jack and you can't get it off unless you're trying to drive off of it. And so we came up with some plates that we would throw down on the ground to put the jack on top of that plate. Finding out where do you get hung up and stuff, and that simple tire change, if you're having to go to, the store or go somewhere when things are bad, having the ability to change that tire quick, even if it's just you, might be a huge thing, right? So just problem solving all your stuff, go through that and say, all right, well, hey, here's what our current problem is. What does that look like? How do we fix that if it's hard times? How do we address that? Again, I'm a big believer in the base plan. It's like with your food. Yes. What are you going to eat? You're going to eat out of your refrigerator first. That should be your go-to, your fridge, your freezer, and all of that. Then your alternate is, okay, I have all these canned foods, right? Let me go to my canned foods. Then your contingency is, okay, maybe I got my freeze-dried meals. Then that emergency is, all right, I'm going out to the woods and trying to get whatever, fishing or whatever the case may be. But look at all your stuff in a primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency plan. And that'll tell you how long you have of survival in you. Because at the end of the day, unless you have the ability to grow your own food, get your own food on your place, we're all on the clock as soon as that clock starts ticking. As soon as disaster hits and we can't get anything, Your clock is winding down. So having a plan that addresses all those different phases of, and so you know what it looks like, because the more you understand what your plan looks like and what to expect, the better you can be at prepping yourself so that you, again, constantly address those shortcomings.
Now, Brian, you actually brought up a good point I want to mention. I'm sorry, T, to interrupt you.
Yeah, jump in there, man.
We're talking about the jack for what, a Suburban? Is that correct?
Yeah, up armored Suburbans.
Okay, up armored Suburbans. So anybody out there who has a vehicle like mine, I have a Toyota 4Runner. I've got a lift on it. T, I know you have a big time lift on your truck. So I experienced this 10, 12 years ago out in Las Vegas. A really good friend of mine who grew up right down the street from me here in Pittsburgh. Moved out to Las Vegas about 17, 18 years ago. And I went out to visit him about 12 years ago. And we went up, we're desert rats, we got shooting all day in the desert. We're coming back. He had a Ford Raptor. The Raptor was like just out, and he put a little bit of a lift on it. I mean, nothing major, just a little bit of a lift. And he blew a tire out coming out of the desert. So as soon as we got out on the highway, it was like not even a quarter mile, and it was totally flat. Like, all right, let's change it. There's 3 of us there. All right, let's change the tire. Well, his jack wouldn't get it up all the way. I mean, it was like an eighth, like between an eighth and a quarter inch more that we needed to get that up. But we just couldn't get the height on the jack. And there was nothing around us in order to jack that thing up a little bit higher to put it underneath the jack. Yep. So we had to call AAA. We're sitting on the side of the road for like 3.5 hours out in the middle of the desert waiting for some, Mexican guy in a Hyundai to show up to jack this freaking Raptor up in order to get us out of this place. Yeah. So those are the tiny things that you need to factor in there. If you have a jack in your vehicle, it's great. But if you have a lift on your vehicle, you need to factor that in whenever you have a flat tire. Make sure you get a jack and actually pick it up high enough to accommodate for your lift.
Yeah. Well, it's like just on the jack, with my truck, I carry my the jack that comes with the vehicle, right? So that's obviously I have that. That's my emergency jack. I also carry a bottle jack with me. Other thing I carry in the back of I just have them laying in the back of the truck is 2 jack stands, because I don't want on that jack that the factory sends you, or a bottle jack. I don't want I got a dually sitting there. I don't want it up on those flimsy jacks. So I want to get it on bottle stands when I'm jerking around with it, because my dad was a mechanic. I worked as a mechanic for a while, and I've seen plenty of trucks come off jacks, and it's just not something you want to have happen. Because then not only does it might land on you, but now you're trying to figure out, how do I get my truck up off the pavement? If a lot of times, depending on how far I'm going, I'll grab a floor jack and I'll throw that in the back. Again, primary, alternate, contingency, right? I did buy one of those electronic Chinese jacks for a while, and then my truck's just too heavy for that. It put it out. The other thing I have is because I was up in Michigan for a while, I have a full set of snow tires for my truck and a full set of road tires for my truck. So like right now, when I was moving up to the, snowy Northeast, I threw all my snow tires on, and I have my road tires sitting there. So I always have the ability to have a couple extra tires with me. Because what happened with you guys out in the desert used to happen. I remember one mission in Iraq, we blew probably 4 tires because that hot pavement just ate those tires up. And so making sure you have, just again, redundancies, primary, alternate, contingency. I can't harp on that enough. I guess I am, but thinking of things through like that, you just never know. And practice, I went out there, I have a low dollar value, low cost impact gun that I use for pulling off my tires. Well, when I put my snow tires on this time, that thing didn't have enough of ass to get some of those lug nuts off. So I went and got a DeWalt, but I have the DeWalt I have, make sure you have a star wrench, right? To be able to get to your different size lug nuts. If you're towing a trailer, trailers, those tires blow all the time. Those tires are made cheap. And so making sure you have the ability to jack up a trailer, and that you have the right lug nut size, because those are different size lug nuts than a lot of your trucks. So making sure you have the ability to get those lug nuts and deal with those as well.
Now, Brian, let me ask you. So you've mentioned a few times here in the last 10 minutes or so, the PACE plan, as most people should know, primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency. So do you have a book or a reference that you go back to as far as a PACE plan that you could recommend for people?
Not really. I haven't seen. It's one of the things I'm working
Mind
on.
for Survival.
I touch on it in there. The best way, the PACE plan was created in the military, and it started with communications, right? Like you had to have especially nowadays, they have satellite communication, so it's a lot different. It's a lot more reliable. But back in the day when I was using, like, the radios were PRCs, called them Prick 77s. I'd have two sitting right next to each other, and I couldn't get them to talk to each other. So then it's what's your alternate, right? When I was in Iraq, we had the vehicle radios, we had our handheld radios, and we had our phones. And so you'd have this PACE plan, because once you're out of communications, if something happens, you're screwed. You can't call for backup. You can't call for assistance, all that. So I look at everything as a PACE plan. Like I mentioned with food, what's your primary source of food? And you should think about how does that interact in your life for just normal everyday stuff. So with your food, well, that's what you have in the fridge. It's what you have in the freezer, right? Then your alternate goes to eating the canned food, and your contingency goes to eating freeze dried or whatever your next level is, your ramen and all that. With your PACE plan for your communications, what's your primary? It's our cell phone. That's your primary form of communication. Well, what happens when that goes down? What's your backup to that? You know, how do you communicate? It's like I was just working on it today. I'm working off of Starlink right now. And so it's like I was working on my Starlink plan because I want to make sure I have, and I found this out in Hurricane Helene, where, dude, Hurricane Helene was terrible for the people of North Carolina. And for me, it showed me a bunch of holes I had in my plan, right? Like all the cell networks down. I see on Facebook, and a lot of people in Facebook groups every once in a while talk about them, the rapid radios. Rapid radios work off cell networks, and there was no cell networks happening in up in the Asheville area once all the cell towers went down.
Right.
So no one was communicating by cell phone. So what's your backup plan? Well, I could get information off my truck by having satellite Sirius radio, but so now I have Starlink that have roaming Starlink. Now that's not foolproof because Starlink still requires certain nodes that are on the ground to work. So if that node, gets wiped out, you still may not be able to communicate, right? So what's your alternative plan to that? Just thinking these through, what can I do to improve my situation a little more by having these redundancies going from what's the, again, if you're worried about something happening, okay, your primary spot where you're going to sit and have all your supplies and your stuff is your house. Your alternate might be a friend's house or a family member's that's a good ways away from you. Maybe your contingency is a storage unit somewhere. And then your emergency is heading out to the woods, right? So thinking through all this just to give yourself redundancies that feel right and that you say, all right, I have the big thing's having control over something, right? Being able to have control over what you're doing.
Well, having control over it too, Brian. I mean, what do you think? To me, everything that you talked about, you would never really know unless you're actually doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So number one of that is actually doing the things that you're preparing for. Just like you said about jacking up your truck and, you found out that the jack sunk into the asphalt. I mean, most people are like, oh, I've got a spare tire, I've got a jack, I'm good, right? Mm-hmm. And unless you were there actually applying that, 26 years as a roadside mechanic. That's what I've done over the years. And oh yeah, no, I mean, so in my truck, I have two jack stands, a bottle jack, the truck jack, a spare tire, a plug kit, an air compressor, shoring, blocking, all my blocks. I have a whole bunch of 4x4s, 6x6s, 4x6s that all set in the back in a milk crate, because you need that kind of stuff. And all of that stemmed from actually doing it, because you don't actually know what you need until you get out there and actually do it. So that's the biggest thing. I had a friend of mine break down. He's like, hey, T, come help me out, man. I don't know what's going on with this engine. I'm like, do you have tools? He's like, yeah, I've got tools. I get over there and he's got a Chevy and he's got all metric wrenches. And I was like, well, it's your lucky day because I carry both. But, that's just a little thing people don't think about. Are you running a Chevy or are you running a Dodge? Are you running standard wrenches and sockets or running metric wrenches and sockets? Because that makes a huge difference when you're on the side of the road trying to take something apart and put it back together. So I think to me that's the biggest thing to stress here with everybody is whatever it is of the prep that you're running, you need to be testing it. If you have a backpack and it's your go bag, you should go hike 5 miles with it now and again. If it holds up and everything works, boom, you're good to go. Just like the Russ of Oz behind the curtain here, they just a few weekends ago threw the packs on and did I think it was 5 miles, 7 miles, something like that. And then back. I think 7 miles out and back, 3 days, and they found out all kinds of stuff. I need to move this. We did the same thing with our Alan K class that we did last month. This is hanging out. I don't need this. Why did I bring this? Why shouldn't I have brought that? And so pressure testing those preps, that's like key number one. The number one factor. Test it.
Well, and you can. There's some people that maybe they don't have the ability or the time all the time to do a lot of tests because you can test everything, right? And so at least mentally walk through the process of that, right? Mindset. In the book, I don't know if you read the first chapter of the book. In the book, I have the factors of success, right? And it's mindset plus ability plus luck equals your chances of success. You can't control luck. So luck's neither, you don't want
to correct you on your own book.
What's that? Did I say time?
You're paraphrasing. I've actually highlighted this. I actually had this prepared because I love the inner. Right?
I was just reading the inner linking circles just earlier.
This is on page 14, right?
It is page 14.
Right before you actually release your book, so I got in for like the early first 4 chapters. I printed them off.
Yeah.
I powered through them. So whenever I got the book, I looked at these and I thought this is one of the best points in your entire book. It's knowledge times skill times resources equals ability. And I looked at that very basically. Like, okay, you have knowledge times skill times resources. So resources are skills. Or I'm sorry, resources are tools. The tools that you have, obviously. Your skill is how much you practice it. Your knowledge, listen, as they say, you cannot outgear knowledge. You just can't do it. You can have the best gear you possibly want, the top end, like high end, best of the line gear, but you're never going to outgear your knowledge. You could have bare bones dollar store gear, but as long as you have the knowledge, you're going to know exactly what to do and you're going to make the best of it. And that equals your ability. And I thought that was a phenomenal point in your book. Well,
and you got to have knowledge. Skill is like your physical dexterity, your ability to do something, right? So, and then your resources, how much quality is the resources? What's the quality and how many do you have? If you have low quality, but you have high quantity, well, you can break a jack and then, okay, I got another jack, T has 2 bottle jacks. You can keep going. So looking at that and then mindset on the front end. If you just have, there's people that might have all the knowledge, the skill and the resources in the world, but they're just in a world of hurt mentally. Well, then all that stuff may not come to apply. So definitely having the knowledge and definitely having the skill and you gain the knowledge by a lot of times by doing it while you're gaining the skill. But the other one is thinking your way through things, thinking about things. Right. You can watch YouTube. I'm a big fan. People, just don't watch YouTube videos. No, you want to actually practice it. But those YouTube videos you can watch, that's some interesting stuff. How does that apply? Let me try that. Let me ponder that. Let me just think about that.
Absolutely.
When I was in Iraq, and this was after they kind of had the, somewhat of a peace agreement going, there was still insurgents and stuff running around. They really reined in our rules of engagement. And so one of the things they came up, I would do a lot of runs from Baghdad out to Ramadi and all out by Fallujah and all that. And we would go through the Abu Ghraib area. And there was a really sharp left hand, depending on which way you're going, really sharp turn, kind of S turn in Abu Ghraib. But when you're in a, up armored Suburban that weighs 10,000 pounds or whatever it weighs, you can't go through this thing very fast. So it's a choke point. When you have to go through a spot and it slows you down, it's called a choke point. And the bad guys were running around with these things at the time called RKG-3s, and they were like a German potato masher grenade that has a shape charge in the head with a little parachute on the back. And when they throw it, the parachute pops out, so it makes the grenade kind of face straight ahead. And that shape charge, when it hits a vehicle, will blast a hole right through that vehicle. It 16,000 degrees or something, it melts a hole in it. And a little grenade, one of these RKG-3s could take out an entire vehicle. So they were like, hey, this is happening. And we were like, well, how do you defend against this thing? And we're just kicking it around in the truck one day when we're sitting somewhere, because you can't just, they're armored doors. And if you're driving down the road, you can't just kick an armored door open. It's too heavy. And even if you can get it open, you can't get up and get a solid shooting platform. So it's not like you're going to pop out of this door and start blasting someone. The windows don't really roll down very well. So it's like, well, what do you do? So I was like, well, we have a 10,000 pound vehicle. Let's just run the dude over. And I remember everybody laughed at me in the truck, right? Because I used to think about this stuff all the time. Like, yeah, doc, because I was a medic. Oh, doc, sure, whatever. Man, it wasn't 3 days later, we're going through our Abu Ghraib, and I look up and I see a dude with an RKG-3, and I'm like, hey, RKG-3 right there. And the shift leader, my team leader, who was busting on me the most for my stupid, let's go run him over, like, run that dude over. Well, we didn't run him over, but we aimed at him with the vehicle, and that dude turned and walked away when he saw us coming down with the vehicle. Because, if you know the OODA loop, right, you're trying to outthink your opponents. That wasn't something he planned on, so we ended up not getting attacked. The next day, the military rolled through there and got hit by that dude with that RKG-3. So it's constantly thinking about creative ways and not going totally crazy where it's unrealistic, like, oh, I'm going to have the Starship Troopers come in and rescue me. But think about realistic things and the capabilities you have. One of the problems people have is they're not honest with their capabilities. Like, I know if I had to put my rucksack on right now, my bug out bag, and walk 20 miles, I could probably do it, but I'm going to be hurting. So, like, you don't hear a lot of people talk about when they pack their bug out bags, pack a big bottle of Motrin. You're going to need it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. No, you're going to need it.
Especially if you don't.
Absolutely.
When I was in the military and we carried rucksacks all the time, I didn't need it. It's like, okay, that stuff was like second nature. But thinking about, like, what's going to happen, what are the problems, and what are my capabilities, and be really honest. You might have physical disabilities. Well, if you got physical disabilities, fine. Play to your strengths, minimize your weaknesses, figure out what you can do.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, yeah, that there to me is the most solid advice you could give anyone right now. And that was kind of one of the questions I was gonna ask was, what do you have for people as far as preparedness? What should they focus on first? And being true and honest to yourself, that's huge. That's huge. 20 miles with a ruck for me right now. What did we do? An hour, I think, with Alan. And of course,
we did
Alan
like
is
35 minutes. We did like 35 minutes.
I'm calling that 3 hours. I think that was a 3-hour run. Felt like a full day, but to be honest with myself, I sat there, I was like, man, I need to start hitting the ruck again like I used to a little bit more often because it smoked me.
And then, so how do you get over that, right? You go, okay, I don't walk with a backpack all the time, maybe never, and I don't have a lot of time to do it, nor do I have the desire to do it. Like, that's the reality for a lot of people. Okay, well then say, if I have to walk with this backpack, I'm going to walk for 15 or 20 minutes and I'm going to stop, take a rest. I'm going to rest for 10 minutes or 15 minutes and I'm going to do it again. And then I'm going to do it again. Each step is a little bit farther down the road, and you can, figure out how do you make it so, one, it doesn't kill you. Two, because part of the problem when you talk about like the whole bugging out thing, you might pull the first day off. But if you're not used to it and you put in a good solid 10 or 20 miles with a heavy backpack, that next day you're going to be a mess.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So
you're looking at you got a week to get squared away and body start getting used to that torture.
Yeah. And so how do you work into that?
That's just walking, right?
Yeah.
Listen, I had a buddy of mine.
That's not fighting a bunch of people.
No, not fighting. And I had a good friend of mine. I'll keep this short, right? I had a good friend of mine call me like right at the beginning of COVID. Of course, I own a gear company. I've had a boatload of people. I mean, my phone was blowing up, right? The beginning of COVID. What do I need? What do I need? What do I need? So a good buddy of mine calls me, and he lives out in Missouri. And he's like, Brian, what do I need? And I said, all right, well, tell me your situation. Tell me what you're prepared for. And he had 2 girls at the time. They were 12 and 14. And I said, what's your plan? And he said, we're going to bug out. And I said, what do you mean bug out? His name is Brad. I said, what do you mean? What do you mean bug out, Brad? And he said, well, right across the street from us is the Mark Twain National Forest in Missouri. And he said, we're going to bug out. We're going to go across the street. We're going to go in the woods. So, Brad, I have known you for a number of years. You have not had a single day of survival training in your entire life. Not one day. You, your wife, and your 2 girls are going to go out there in the middle of the woods. You're going to dehydrate. You're going to starve. You're going to get cold. You're going to turn around. You're going to go back home. Mm-hmm. Stay where you're comfortable. You barely have any gear. I mean, none of the 4 of them even had a water filter. It's like, just stay at home. You have your 4 walls. You have your ceiling. You have your comfort. Stay there as long as you possibly can, and then figure out your contingency plan from there.
Yeah.
Right now, bugging out is not.
Start eating your children. When you run out of food. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. That was a horrible idea.
Yeah. Well, and it's the other side about that is also recognizing when do you need to do that, right? Do you need to bug out, or do you just need to hey, let me make my home, my castle. Like, this is a fortress. Yeah. And because that's the last thing you want to do. But then if times get really hard and you're in, especially an urban area, well, you want to get ahead of that game before you end up getting on the road when things are getting really bad or whatever's happening. You can go watch one of my favorite preparedness movies, and it's all like the first probably hour of the movie is Greenland. Greenland's a great movie for watching. All of a sudden, everybody realizes like, oh, this is bad. What are we doing? Right. The other one besides Greenland is World War Z. Right?
Oh, because that's a real good one for that.
When stuff starts happening, they go, look at what's happening at the supermarkets. And you can take the zombies out of it. You can take the asteroid out of it. But they do a good job of representing what might things look like if everything goes crazy. When I was in Southern California, I was there when the LA riots happened. And the night the riot started, like, it had started down in South Central LA. I was up by Pasadena. So there was nothing going on up there. I go over to Pasadena with my buddy to go to the gym. We're inside the gym. It's quiet. It's peaceful. It's kind of like it's like there's a bunch of bars and restaurants. It's like one of those nightlife areas. Everything's peaceful. And then within 5 minutes, people, like, it just turned, like, instantly. People were throwing stuff through the windows. There were riot cops in riot gear running everywhere. There's cops circling overhead. The place melted down. I'm still amazed. And some of the times when I've been overseas and seen things go bad quick, it turns so fast that just really need to have that plan. But I think, again, Greenland and looking at like stuff like, some of those movies we talked about, it gives you a good idea of like, okay, if things go bad, what am I going to do? Well, you don't want to be out in that. Secure your home. No. Best thing you can do is secure your home, whether that's an apartment, whether it's a house. You can go put in a door armor, like a strip that reinforces your door. Even if you live in an apartment, they'll never know. Just throw it up there, right? You can do some of that stuff to make yourself more fortified.
And I just there was 3 hours, Matt. You're a liar. That was a 3-hour ruck with Alan. I don't care what you say. I'll leave that alone. I thought we was friends, bro. Here's a true story, something that people don't think about. I was on the fire department for about 6 years as well, volunteer, but we did a whole lot of high-speed accidents and extrication and stuff like that. But we actually had a call. The house was on fire. So luckily, the person was not inside the house, but we could not get in the house because they had literally up-armored their house so well that we couldn't get in the house. They had the bars on the windows. The front and back door had the steel security doors on them. we were beating on this stuff. I mean, they had lag bolted through the lock set areas for the hinges. We couldn't get in. We ended up busting through the side of the wall to crawl into this house. Luckily, nobody was in there, because if they would have been, they wouldn't have made it. But
Yeah.
you know, that's another side of this is there is such a thing as maybe overdoing it if we need to save you. So before we jump out of here, you know, you deal with the mental preparedness of this, your mindset as well. What advice can you leave everybody with, as far as if they are struggling, you know, and it doesn't have to be in a bad sense or real bad to where it becomes an issue of life and death, but how do you get to that place of peace? What worked for you?
Man, I'm still working on it. You know, I think everybody, my last chapter in the book, chapter 8, I get into self, and it's all about mentally dealing with stuff that comes along with preparedness. You know, we're prepping for really difficult times. A lot of us, none of us prep because we feel good about the future. We prep because we're worried about the future, right? So that brings anxiety. There's all kinds of stuff that comes with that. So my thing is, one, give yourself the grace to know that, like, hey, man, we're all going to have problems at times. There's going to be days when we're down. There's going to be days when we're up. There's going to be days when things go wrong. And it's when things do happen, try not to dwell on it. Take what you can from it, find a way to learn from it and improve it. So either that doesn't happen, or you're more resilient next time that it does happen. You're more aware of it, and you get ahead of it. Right. So it's constantly observing yourself, right? We're really hard. A lot of us, I think, we're hardest on ourselves. So practice looking around you, and you see people that like irritate you and stuff. Practice giving other people grace and empathy. Like, hey, man, you know, it's everybody struggles. Like, everybody has the bugaboos that cause them to do certain things in their life. And so look at them and like, hey, that person's just struggling with where they're at, because, man, whatever's happened to them is that's what's causing this. And then once you do that, a lot of times you'll find you can start doing that more for yourself. And I think giving ourselves the grace and empathy to screw up, then to regroup and figure out what we did wrong and move forward from that. Because sometimes when we screw up or we have hard times going on, we just kind of shut down. We don't move forward anymore. Like, I can't do anything. We hear it all, like when, and I know a lot of people in the prepping community, I've done it. When we see people that say, I don't want to prepare because it scares me. Well, yeah, that think about that. Like, they're so mentally that screws with them so much that a person that knows there might be bad times doesn't even want to do it because it's so overwhelming and so fear causing that they just can't do it. Right. So it's like, wow, that really stinks. Well, it can stop us along the way from prepping to be as good as we can. There's certain things we might get set for. It's why we tend to focus on certain things and leave other things to happen, because for some reason that other thing causes a bugaboo, you know, causes an issue. So work on finding out what that stuff is. Understand that, hey, something makes me feel a little cattywampus about this way. Well, if you feel cattywampus about it, if it makes you feel awkward or weird or you know, whatever, understand that that's your mind working on. That's your mind doing that to you, and go, okay, well, it doesn't have to. I hate getting up and working out in the morning. Like it's like dragging. It's like dragging my butt across a mile of broken glass. But I know that it's like, why wouldn't I do that? It's good for me. It's just like eating healthy. I know it's good for me. And so do I like it? No, I want fast food, man. I love fast food. I don't eat it. And I force myself to try to eat healthy. I force myself to get out and get sun in the morning and do all the stuff that I know is good for me. And so when you find yourself struggling with that, understand that there's an issue there. If you find yourself struggling with, why don't I want to prepare for this or think about that or do that? Understand that that's all internal. And so you can start working on it. Why am I doing that? Peel back those layers, give yourself the confidence and give yourself the support that you can say, hey, I can do this. Because any of our limitations that happen typically, other than physical stuff, all come from within our mind. And that's where you can go in and use that mindset to start working on, start peeling back those layers. It doesn't happen man, when I went through all my, and I still struggle with it at times, my post-traumatic stress, not anywhere near like I used to be. But when I was deep in that, where I was thinking about eating a gun and I couldn't get off the couch for 2 or 3 days at a time, I was smoking a mountain of pot all the time. You don't change your mindset quick. It takes work, and it takes a lot of work over a long time. It's like, to me, it's the hardest bit of training you can do is working on your mindset.
And that's great. That is great advice, bro. Like, and just the first part of your answer there, when I asked you that, was I'm still working on it. There's the meat and potatoes of the whole thing. Like, you're always working on it. It's just what it is. You got to keep working on it. So, Brian, Mr. G, what you got to roll us out of here, man, before we wrap it up?
Listen, I cannot top that. I just can't. All right. Brian Duff said it. Brian D said it perfectly. Everything you said there, trying to get your mind over, mind over matter. Trying to get your mind over. I mean, the matter is our bodies. Listen, we're aging guys. It was a lot easier 20 years ago, right? It was a lot easier to get up and do some badass stuff, but not so much these days. But honestly, I cannot take anything away from what Brian said. You put it perfectly. I have a few things I marked in this book. I'm not going to mention them because, again, I cannot say it any better than Brian has already said it. Thanks. Pick up the Mind for Survival book.
There we go, guys. Where can they find you at Brian?
Where
can people find you at? Yes.
Look for the book, man. Just head over to Amazon, put in Brian Duff in the search bar. It'll pop up. Russ has a QR code there as well. It's Mind. The book is Mind, and it's a space between this. It's a little bit different than my brand. Mind space 4, the number, and then space survival. You can pull it up on Amazon, and then hit me up on mindforsurvival.com, podcast, website, and all that good stuff.
Awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough, Brian. It is amazing, man. You just start talking, and then an hour, boom, is just gone. It's just gone that fast. I really enjoy having you on, and we've got to do it again too.
Anytime, man. I love it. This is my gig, man. Anytime you want me, I'll come on, jump on. Like, we'll have fun.
Absolutely. Loved it. So, guys, there you have it. Mind for Survival. I am reading this currently. There's a lot of great stuff in here. It gives you a different look, a different perspective to survival. All those little things that you forget about, not the major stuff, the things, the backup stuff of that PACE plan. So, appreciate you guys. Appreciate you, Brian. Other Brian. Guys, catch us next Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern. I believe we have Nick Meacher coming on to talk about comms, because just like we were just talking about, that's something that I know I lack in big time. And we'll see if we can delve into that and make some sense of some of the stuff that he's going to be teaching. And, of course, Brian is going to be back with us teaching. Both these Brians is going to be teaching with us in May. It's going to be a great time. So, remember, guys, if you're going to move with purpose, and roll us out of here, Mr. Russ of the Wizard of Russ, back behind the curtains. See y'all next time.